Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. You know the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch? Well, especially, it seems, if ACT Party leader David Seymour has got anything to do with it. He has just been appointed the Minister of No Such Thing as a Free Lunch, especially talking school lunches. This is a policy that the ACT Party campaigned on, to be fair, but what sort of impact will it have on the students who are currently enjoying school lunches? Joining me on the program from the Salvation Army Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit, Ana Ika. Ana, kia ora. Thanks for your time today.
Well, Andrew, always a pleasure.
This saying no such thing as a free lunch, I mean, talk to us about the scale of it. It started off, okay, here and there in some of the lower decile schools and neighbourhoods, but school lunches has become quite a thing across the country now, right?
Yeah, the government, the previous government, Labor, they committed $350 million to run school lunches throughout the country, and it's primarily in areas of high deprivation. So it's in schools in those particular areas, and it originally started in primary schools and intermediates, but slowly started rolling out in secondary schools as well.
Yep.
So it's to be able to provide school lunches to particular schools that are part of the program.
I mean, from the impact that this has on child poverty, of course, this just takes a bit of pressure off households in that community. When it's do we keep the power on, or do we send the kids to school with lunches? I mean, it's a bit of a tough call for some of these households.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know from our food banks that we have a lot of families that come in during school holidays, and primarily because they're used to their kids being fed at school. And so when they're on holiday, there's a strain in regards to the food that they have in the household. And so we know from frontline experiences that that these families, particularly that we support, are having to weigh out in having to choose between paying a bill and having food. And so the lunches in school,
Yep.
goes a long way in regards to, I guess, alleviating some of those pressures for those families.
There's been a lot of research, I understand, as well, looking at academic outcomes for children who do go to school hungry, who don't have breakfast, who don't have anything in their lunchbox. Poorer academic outcomes, less likely to get jobs, more likely to be beneficiaries, and so the cycle continues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If kids are going to school on an empty stomach, haven't had breakfast, don't have any lunch, and yes, that has it's been researched and been proven that those kids just don't fare well academically, and we know that education is often a foundation to future outcomes for our children. So if they're not if they're not achieving academically, then that has implications on employment and and just the ability to focus. And it's kind of like a domino effect,
Yep.
Andrew. It
Yep.
just creates a whole bunch of challenges in the future where that could be mitigated easily by giving kids lunches and breakfast as well.
Now, to be fair on David Seymour, and I mean, it's easy to paint him as the bad guy, and he's the Grinch that stole school lunches. However, I don't think David Seymour would argue that children should eat. This isn't a question of whether or not children should have lunch at school. It's a question on who should pay for it. Should it be the government's responsibility to feed the children in our schools, or should that be something which is dealt with at a family level, at a whānau level, at a community level, by great organisations such as the Salvation Army, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the narrative is that he's trying to get rid of it, but I think if you listen to what he's saying, not that we agree with him, it's about cutting back, because we need to acknowledge that about 12% of school lunches every day don't get eaten.
Yep.
And so that's a significant waste when we're looking at food insecurity in this country. So if he is going to cut back, then the challenge then is if he depends on communities and families to have ownership of feeding their children, then is the government going to provide those avenues for those families and those community groups to be able to be able to meet that need? And that's not part of the discussion.
Yep.
The discussion at the moment is just to pull school lunches, or pull partially part of the school lunches. And I think the discussion there is, because of this, it has to be targeted a targeted approach, because in some areas, in some schools, we know that the school lunches is working really well. But then in other areas, there is, partial wastage there.
Yep.
So I think that's I guess his what he's trying to push. But ultimately, like overall, like lunches in schools is making a difference for those for our children and our young people that get to have free lunches in schools and their families.
I suppose the other question is who's best at doing this, and there is some wastage in the system, as you can say. Look, if all of the food that was provided gets eaten, that's a better outcome, I suppose, rather than wastage. But honestly, given how much is wasted every day by supermarkets and restaurants, etc., it's a bit of a drop in the bucket situation. But my question is, I suppose, about whether or not the government is the best provider for that, whether or not this is the best use of taxpayer money, or is it the situation that charities such as the Salvation Army, such as, Kids Can, had been doing wonderful work providing school lunches in schools for many years before the government caught up and got on board on this one. They had some corporate sponsorship. They had donations from Sanitarium and other people like that. It was a community initiative. Some people would say that actually a community initiative like that often does a better job of connecting in with real needs than a government department just saying, okay, how much money do you need?
Yeah, I think one of the discussions at the moment is around the school lunch providers. We do know that when schools provide their lunch internally, then they have better outcomes in regards to having less food wastage, just because the school has employed parents or employed people in the community to come in and to be able to provide those lunches. It's when you're looking at the providers of school lunches that work at, I guess, a higher margin. That's when the challenge comes, because they're not necessarily on the ground and understand what the palate of the kids like, which is, if you're going to give kids in South Auckland couscous, they know what couscous is.
That's where food wastage, it ends up in the bin, and that's where you get food wastage.
Yeah,
Come on, give us some real food.
And so those are the challenges. I think if the government doesn't provide school lunches, they're going to pay for it in another area. If our kids aren't engaged in education and employment outcomes, then they're going to have shortfalls in other areas, which is going to need government investment to be able to address that. I think providing lunches in schools ultimately is a barrier at the top of the cliff, as opposed to funding ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. I agree with you that Kids Can and other community organizations do a phenomenal job in regards to feeding our tamariki, but it's about partnership, and it's about working together with community organizations like the Salvation Army, like Kids Can, like other organizations that are on the ground. It's about the government working together, as opposed to just, bulldozing their way through and trying to make a difference. It's always about partnership and community working together. Yeah,
working with charities and local organizations at a local school level, rather than saying, hey, look, we've cut school lunches, but don't worry, you're all getting tax cuts. It's a difficult balance in that regard. Anna, thank you so much for the work that you do at the Salvation Army. Thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.